How's it going, everybody? Triarius Wargaming here. So I wanted to do a quick bench update of what I've been working on and a little army showcase here of the start of my French and Indian War force here, and then a couple other things I've been working on. So the French are all based up here, and this is basically the one of the initial sort of recommended forces from the Sharp practice rule book, and I'll kind of talk you through what I put together here. So to start, we got our two groups of French Canadian militia skirmishers, and this is kind of a rating force so far. So we got one group over here of 6 men. And I did these kind of circle bases. The idea was to, so it'd be easier to move them around. I really loved these figures. These were so much fun to paint. And you can see, I think this guy right back here is my favorite of this group, actually. I really like this figure. These are wonderful models from Brigade Games. So he's, that guy's one of my favorite of the bunch. I like that guy a lot too, the kneeling guy. And I'll try not to ramble too much. So we have the group leader here, the formation leader. So that is actually not a Brigade Games model. That is from Sash and Saber, and he is probably going to be replaced as the commander of this unit as soon as the reinforcements arrive in the mail. And then we got the second unit here. And I think this fellow right here is my favorite of this group. So the French Canadian militia, they were, as it sounds, they were a militia force. And for their coat, they're kind of in winter clothing. So you can see of that group, they're all either in blue or white, or kind of the off-white coats. So I did a bunch of research looking at reenactor pages for these, and a lot of people, I see a lot of them painted with very colorful coats. From my research, I found those are not technically appropriate for this time period, I think. So mainly the coats would either be in white or blue, white for Catholics and blue for Huguenots, Protestants. I'm not 100% sure if that's correct, but what I did see from the reenactor pages is that white was really the most common color for these. And similar to the French army of this time period, and also the Austrian army, the Habsburg army, these white coats shouldn't technically be a pure white. What they are is actually a white undyed wool. So they're more of a gray, pearl gray sort of white than a true white, which I did try and do on some of these, but they came out pretty white. But what I did a bunch of them in that kind of bone white or kind of browny white to kind of do that undyed look, that undyed wool look. And my thinking here with these guys is, what's going on here is, rather than wash the coats to take out stains when on campaign, the armies would really do is they'd actually powder them with like a white starch powder to cover over any stains. So the ones in the lighter white coats, I'm thinking they like to look pretty sharp, and they powdered their coats to be bright white. And then the kind of bone brown ones, the bone white ones, I'm thinking, they're kind of more veterans. They've been on campaign for a while. They're not really that interested in looking sharp. That kind of the browny white kind of blends in better with the wood. So they're happy to kind of to not starch their coats. So that's what my thinking was there. And this guy is actually a French Marine officer. These French Marines would often lead these groups of militia and Indians. And the French militia generally were considered to be far superior to the British militia of the same time period. And I'm not going to go a ton into the quotes in this video, but there are sources that mention how much more skilled the French militia was at woods fighting. So next we have our Indian allies, and these could be, mainly either Hurons or Abenaki or Wabanaki, as they're sometimes called. But also, Indians from all over the Northwest as well joined with the French, and even further off, even off of the Great Plains. Some came in search of rewards. So here's our chieftain, and technically these guys really should have black and red war paint, but I was kind of too lazy to paint that, to be honest, and I didn't want to risk messing it up, I guess. So here's our war leader, and this guy, in short practice, you kind of name your characters. So this guy is LaForce, and he was a Huron, a real life Huron war chief, LaForce. And then we got the band. Now, the rules recommend you do them in kind of these war bands. Well, that's how they're written anyways, generally, is in these kind of war bands of 12. I was initially going that way, but after more kind of research and, my own personal thinking, I think it makes more sense to run them as 2 groups of 6 skirmishers. Now, they're, skirmishers who are good in hand-to-hand combat, but that more accurately, I think, represents the Indian style of fighting, and that's what people also have been doing on the forums. And I think these guys were a lot of fun to paint too. I love all the colors on them. The warbands, I think they're too aggressive, and they're too focused on hand-to-hand combat. And one passage I read, it talked about how the Native Americans, right there, these kind of more, they did have agriculture. They weren't true hunter-gatherers. They did use a lot of agriculture, but in their society, they didn't really have the population surplus that Europeans had. So every man was extremely valuable, and a lot of their wars were about taking captives who they would literally, through a ceremony, say you take captives to replace people they had lost, and they would do a ceremony where they're like, if they captured a white European, they also captured other tribes. If they captured a European, they do a ceremony, and they'd say, you're no longer a European, you are literally this person from our tribe who died, and you're replacing them. But each member of the tribe had really important roles, or each member of the band had really important roles. And if they died, those roles just couldn't really be replaced. They really needed every man on board for hunting. So they really did not want to take casualties. They were very casualty adverse. And the natives would get into close combat, but that was mainly if they were sure they could really kill them, the enemy easily. When the enemy was already kind of defeated, they weren't going to really risk charging into gunfire. They were interested in taking captives and taking spoils and taking scalps. They really had no interest in dying for France or Britain. So that makes more sense to me, feeling them as kind of beefy skirmishers who have to whittle down the enemy first before going to hand-to-hand combat. And I did try and make forest bases here. I don't think I was super successful at that. I think the vegetation needs to be a little more sparse to really look foresty. And so here's our last element of this army. These are the coureurs de bois, according to the rule book. And so these are basically your French militia on steroids, and most of the coureurs de bois figures here are from Sash and Sabre, and then the nicer looking Indians are from Brigade Games, and they have their leader here as well, telling them to be quiet, sneaky. So in the game, these are armed with rifles. I'm not really sure how historical that is. I've never heard any account of the French being armed with rifles. That's kind of more of a German thing that the German settlers bring to, like Pennsylvania and Virginia. So not too sure about that. But, these are the best white, European woodsmen of the day, the French coureurs de bois. So the way, woodsmen, so the way I kind of wanted them portrayed is more as kind of métissage or métis is what the French call them. Métissage or métis, it means they're half caste, so they have one French parent and one native parent. That was really common, especially with the French. They would intermarry very readily. So they're really adept at fighting at the native style. So they're also great skirmishers, and I'm gonna play them with rifles just for the variety. Even though the British forces were probably more likely to actually be using rifles in this conflict. But anyways, I think so. This is what I've got for the French so far. And what's going to be coming next is some of it is here, some of it is still in the mail and coming from the Brigade Games Kickstarter. But we're going to be, and also from Black Hussar Miniatures, my Black Hussar Miniatures order just shipped. So what's going to be coming with those is we're going to end up having 24 more French Marines, who were kind of the colonial troops that were always in the colonies. And then we'll have two groups, so 16 men in total. We'll have 3 groups of the French Marines, and then 2 groups, 16 men in total, of the French regulars. And I'm going to be painting them as if they were from the Languedoc Regiment. And I'd also use those French troops as French grenadiers, because the French really used grenadiers heavily for their special operations, to the point where, you know, officers were complaining, like, you're wasting our grenadiers, they're dying too often, please stop wasting the grenadiers. But I'll probably field them as grenadiers, I think. And the Languedoc Regiment was one of the regiments posted at Fort Carillon. So, and those were shipped to France expressly for the French and Indian War. So that's kind of my little showcase of the French troops, but we have some more stuff to show you here too. So what I've also been working on back here is and I'll try to keep that light off. We got a lot of sunlight. So what we got back here, and hopefully you can, I'll be doing a proper video on these guys, but I did just finish them, so I wanted to show them off. We have here the British provincial troops, and I painted these up a lot nicer than they probably looked in real life, and they're kind of chocolate soldiers, to be honest. They were really not good troops, but basically they were served on a 1-to-1 ratio with the British regulars. There's their leader. I really love that model. And then we got the Highlanders of the Black Watch. And we're going to be adding another unit of Highlanders for sure. Another 8 of these guys. I love the Highlanders. And in addition, you know, probably going to be doing more 8 Provincials. We're going to have militia coming. And then what we're also going to have coming is the 55th Regiment of Foot. So we're going to have grenadiers with their mitre caps, and also the infantry. And I'm getting ahead of myself, but the 55th Foot was Lord Howe, George Augustus Howe's regiment. And he was actually killed in a skirmish on a scout along with Robert Rogers. He was scouting with Robert Rogers with the 55th when he was killed, and he was the most beloved British officer by the Americans. One regiment I will not be doing is the 80th Foot, which was similarly so the 55th Foot was organized by Howe to be light infantry. The 80th Foot, which is Gage's regiment, was also organized to be light infantry. But I hate Gage, and I'll talk about that later, so we can't do his regiment. So coming to the primer right now is these legionaries. I'm going to be priming them right after this video, and I'll talk about that in a second. We got 6 more Indians to join the French with their leader. These are going to be, skirmishers like the other ones. And then we've got 6 settlers, and the leader, and the guy on the horse is going to be the leader of the militia. So we're going to get those primed up shortly. The militia is still on the way in the mail. Okay, so the legionaries, today when I'm filming this is Friday. Tomorrow is Saturday, and on Saturday tomorrow, I've kind of got the house to myself for the evening, so no girlfriend to worry about. that evening. So we're gonna be doing a mega painting session, and it's actually not gonna be too crazy, but I've got a bunch of these legionaries who I've been sitting on the desk for quite some time, to be honest, in this half painted stage. So, they're kind of blocked in with a wash, but they're not highlighted yet. And so, they still got a bunch of work to go on these guys, is what I'm saying. But I started these and I never really finished my Romans. I lost steam. So the goal is going to be to get these guys all done and get 8 more of these done, and also rebase a bunch of stuff that I already worked on. And the idea behind all this is I got someone who wants to play Infamy, so I got to get my Roman force all settled. And I think with the Romans, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be steadily working on them over time, because I've got about 40 of these Aventine troops to add, and a few, extra cavalry, and some Numidian cavalry as well, or Moorish cavalry, who did serve with the Imperial Army. They're on Trajan's column. So that was a lot of rambling from me. I am actually moving house next week, so I'm trying to keep the painting desk set up as long as possible to stay productive. But I am going to be moving house, so I'm going to be talking through some of my books, I think, as I pack them up. So that's going to be coming soon. I'll probably do a bit of that on Saturday as well. But thanks for listening to me rambling. If you've got this far, lots of projects in the pipeline, a little too much. Now that I've gotten started painting these French and Indian War, it's making me really love this kind of musket era. I want to do Revolutionary War and some Napoleonics, but I'm not gonna buy. But a lot of these French and Indian War stuff will work. Indians did fight in the American War of Independence. Those provincial troops will work well for a continental regiment. I also want to do the 1st Rhode Island Regiment. As well, and I've got some bits and bobs, so we're not going to have to buy too much to add an AWI component. And then I've got some Napoleonics, which I was going to sell, but I think I'm actually going to paint them up because I've kind of been inspired. And then we've got Normans, we've got the Romans, we got some Arabs that I purchased, so we really have got a lot to do. So I'm going to stop rambling and wasting your time. See you next time, and thanks for watching.